Hi, everyone. This is Christina, one of the co-producers of the Yin for Yang podcast, and this is our first video episode, which I'm really excited to bring to you. We are going to talk today in this episode about some female Yang Gang's reactions to the December debate that Andrew was most recently in. And first, I'm going to have our fellow panel members introduce themselves, and then we can get straight into it. I, as you know, am Christina. I'm a mom of three who lives in DC. So Rebecca, Wendy.
Hi, I'm Becca. I've been a UBI nerd for years and years and years, and I've been doing everything I can with the campaign for a little bit now. You may see me doing admin stuff over on the Facebook group Basecamp.
Hi, I'm Wendy, Reverend Wendy Hamilton. I am a local minister here in Washington, D.C. I have been involved with the Yang campaign, if you will, since February of 2018. So I think that makes me a YGOG. And I am very excited to be here and to talk about all things Yang.
All right. So Rebecca, let us know your preliminary thoughts about how things went in the debate.
Yeah, so we were talking about this before we started recording. I heard about Yang probably around the same time, February 2018. That's the first I can prove that I'd heard of Andrew Yang, at least. In a year when everyone's just like, how did this happen? How is he? We're all just going to be like, I knew so early. We're all going to be terrible hipsters, but it's okay because we're going to be terrible hipsters with $1,000 a month. But I had this kind of idea because I was first introduced to the idea of UBI with this concept that once the truckers go, there's going to be these dominoes that fall because artificial intelligence will be sufficiently advanced that it's just as worthwhile to program a new program rather than write a new training program for employees, because eventually those are just going to start to line up. And so I had an idea that once the Democratic Party realizes that we have this vision that we can go grab middle America with, that we can go reach all of these different people with, one of the big ones, that's always been this huge blind spot for the Democratic Party is stay-at-home moms. And that's, I think, something, I don't remember if he got specifically to that, but this debate is where it really started to feel like Andrew hit, UBI is the vision for the whole political spectrum, and it's really exciting. I'm really excited to see where things are going to go from here.
Well, I'm with you, Rebecca, on that one. I think that, Andrew's been so good about staying on message. That's one of the things that people talk about in his debate performances, including this one, is how he is always able to make sure that he returns to, emphasizes, pivots to his primary positions as far as UBI, the freedom dividend, democracy dollars and such. This particular debate, I have to say I was a nervous wreck at first. I'm always nervous because, unfortunately, the way these debates are set up, they're set up to try to, create gotcha moments or, something that's going to be able to be captured in a sound bite of some sort that can be played over and over again. And so I always get nervous, on debate night, and I go into prayer oh God, please just help Andrew do well. And this time was no different. But, given the fact that this is December, this was the 6th debate, we were the last, candidate to sort of make it on stage. It just seemed like the stakes on this one were a lot higher. And I have to say, I know that I'm biased, but Andrew really delivered on this one. I think that he hit a number of subject areas and was able to articulate them plainly enough that, like you said, Rebecca, people are now beginning to embrace the ideas. Even heard a couple of other candidates on stage parroting some of Andrew's talking points. So all in all, I think it was one of his best performances, and I think it's going to really propel us forward.
Yeah, I have to echo you in how great of a job he did. I thought he did an excellent job. Unfortunately, Betsy couldn't join us today. Betsy's been a lot more positive about this debate than I have been in our IM exchanges. She's basically said that he killed it, that he like absolutely did amazing. And like, she thinks that scores and scores of people are going to join the Yang Gang. I maybe it's because I have super, super high expectations. Like I thought he really did well with the time he was given. I thought, all of his answers were spot on. He's usually, brilliant and very concise when he speaks. So he got a lot of content in for the limited amount of time he had. But if you take a look at, other candidates and how they maximize their time, I mean, it's just math, right? Like if you mention another candidate by name, you end up getting more time. So someone like Klobuchar, who's ranked, polling lower than Yang, if you don't count the official polls, but just like all polls, right? She's polling lower than Yang, and she just got, almost as much speaking time as like, she got the second most speaking time, almost as much speaking time as like the person that got the most speaking time, right? So the 19 to 20 minute mark versus, 10, 11 minute mark, it makes a huge difference. And she was able to get that amount of time because she sort of like, utilize the rules to her advantage, where she, tagged individual people and who she was criticizing, and then she got to have it back and forth and respond a lot more. And so I thought he could have done that more, but of course there are pros and cons to that, because if you do that, then you might be seen as like super negative and aggressive.
Right.
So you increase the people who agree with you, but then you also antagonize people too. So,
I thought he had one really good play that he made to increase his speaking time. And it was born out of him not getting to answer the immigration question, where the debate moderator was like trying to give him the chance to answer it. And so he went back to it on his next question when it was it was the immigration question he was asked, and he went back to the women's issue, perhaps. There was one that basically he went back to, and the debate moderators asked him, like gave him another shot at the question initially, and it was like, oh, he just answered a different question and got more speaking time. Like, he sort of really play it well, I think.
I agree with you, Christina and Rebecca, to a certain degree, but what I'm beginning to see, which, may or may not be a bad thing, because we've all, seen that Andrew normally winds up with the least amount of speaking time. And we can all pretty much agree with that. And there's graphs that show over the course of the 6 debates, he's always been at the bottom or near the bottom in terms of speaking time. However, we also know that Andrew doesn't give long-winded answers either. And so some people are saying, tell him to keep talking, take up all of your time and take up somebody else's time. And that's not necessarily his nature, although that's the nature of the debate stage. And again, it's, for television. But what I am hearing more and more now is quantity over quality. And that Andrew is beginning to emerge as someone who may not have a lot of speaking time, but he seems to have the most to say. I'm seeing a lot more of comments around, he says so much, his comments that he does make are so content rich, if you will, that it's not really necessarily hurting him that he anymore, that he's not getting as much as, say, a Klobuchar or a Joe Biden, who, will keep talking and say, oh, I'm sorry, is it, because there is this difference between talking and speaking. And so
right.
Some folks are beginning to notice that, and I'm seeing that sort of idea being promoted a little bit more. So
no, I totally hear you. And speaking of content, let's get into content. Rebecca, do you have some points that you thought that he made that were really salient as far as how he promoted his platform or how he answered the content of the questions he was asked?
Well, I had one more thing I wanted to
sure.
Sort of echo what Wendy was saying, because I was looking through and I was seeing if I could pull it up here. I saw a couple different measures of like debate performance. One of them was a measurement of just like the winners and losers list. And by that one, it seemed like Amy Klobuchar did about twice as good as Andrew Yang. But then if you look at the 538 lists, which I think are pretty good, they're not perfect, but they're outperforming everyone else. Puts Andrew's performance pretty on par to Amy's. And I don't know if we all saw that Iowa focus group video where everyone's like,
I want to go hang out with Andrew Yang. Everybody at the table, every single one of them.
They're like, he's secret. I've always secretly liked him. I think this thing where we have this really broad group of support, and there's one group that's arrived really early. There's us crazy people that we're just like, yeah, we're here right away. We're gonna do it. But I do think there's a moment coming at some point where that huge group of people that's all like, I like him, but can he win? And they're all going to see each other and they're going to be like, oh yeah, we can, yeah. But as far as his strongest point, I mean, I laughed so hard at the get a group of guys together and they're a bunch of morons. And they cut to Amy Klobuchar immediately after, which was and she was
seething
because she knew she needed a really strong performance in that debate, and she's just like, oh, that was.
She had a bunch of strong moments because she had plenty of time to talk, but you know, the danger is if she's perceived as too strong. And there was an article on that too, where Warren and Klobuchar were the only two candidates who answered the gift or apology question with an apology, because women, especially political figures, are, you know, judged more harshly for being too aggressive. And so they felt obligated socially to like apologize if they were too, you know, whatever, you know, and they might legitimately have been too whatever, but the male candidates would never have said that, you know, like they all just reached immediately for the gift option instead. So,
well, I think for me, of course, there were many moments, you know, shaking the money tree in the wine cave and, you know, the soundbite types of things that those debates try to generate. But I think for me, it was Andrew's approach to race that really shined through, that stood up, that he rose to the occasion, in my opinion, with that question by embracing the idea that he was the only person of color on stage. It was kind of disheartening to me as a person of color to hear the conversations leading up to the debate about whether or not Andrew should be considered a person of color. And I'm like, hello. You know, I know, you know, from my early vacation Bible school days, you know, we'd sing, you know, Jesus loves the little children of the world, red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. I mean, you know, it's kind of old, but
right.
You know, I've always understood that someone who is non-white is a person of color. And so when Andrew was asked about that, I thought he was very poised and very confident in the way that he responded. He said it is, you know, it's a huge honor and a huge disappointment to be the only person of color. And I think that when he allowed the question to be turned into not just a focus on the fact that the people of color were not on the stage, but how what's happening in the country is disproportionately affecting people of color, that was masterful. And he said something along the lines of, you know, black and brown people, he cited some statistics because it's all about the math, baby. And then he talked about that it's the numbers that we're up against, not just the words and what's being said. And that if there were more disposable income being made available, if folks had more options financially, then he probably would not be the only person of color on the stage. Now, I saw some articles and some pushback like, well, if people were getting money, they wouldn't be donating it to campaigns. Clearly, they haven't met the Yang Gang, and they don't know to what lengths folks are going. First of all, not all Black and brown people are poor, so let's dismiss that. But also, when you have passion and when you care about someone, you don't know what a person is going to do, and we can't not dictate someone who has disposable income whether or not they would donate to a political candidate. But I have seen people doing, some of the most creative things in an effort to support Andrew, and so I don't think that charge was necessarily fair. But I appreciate Andrew taking on that role of being the person of color and speaking up for the person of color groups.
Yeah, I also saw that criticism leading up to the debate of like, well, Asian's almost the same as white, and so it doesn't really count.
Right.
And, on the one hand, I could see what they were saying, and that, the average Asian household income as a group, even though it's disparate and there are a lot of groups within the Asian community that are poor. But, as a whole, the average is, higher than the average white median income. And so it's like, you have nothing to complain about. You're basically white. And so, I can sort of see that argument, because it is a reality that on average, it is a higher family income. But at the same time, from a diversity standpoint, right, you haven't seen an Asian president yet, or a vice president, or even like Secretary of State, or, whatnot. And so he is a person of color. And it is, with the Chinese Exclusion Act and a bunch of other things that have happened, it's not like nothing, the fact that he's, someone of color. Yeah.
I appreciate that it has forced us to have the conversation in
right.
terms of, okay, well then, what is a person, or what does that mean? Or if Asian is more white, is that because of their socioeconomic status or because of the diversity? Because, as Andrew mentioned on stage, he can remember being bullied and being name called and things like that, because you have some folks who will say, well, Asians haven't experienced the same level of oppression as Black or brown peoples, but they have experienced some measure, and I don't get to diminish someone else's as, well, yours wasn't as bad as mine. You understand what I'm saying? And
right.
So it really has fostered what I think is a very healthy conversation around, well, who gets to define, person of color, and what are we really truly saying? If we're just saying oppressed peoples, then that's, but I think it's been good to start that conversation so that people can, even have some time of self-reflection around what this actual designation, if you will, actually means, what we're saying when we state that.
Yeah, I think he spoke to that directly, which is, what we said at first, which was there's words and there's numbers, and some people have both working against them and some people have one working against them. And
right.
Eventually what has to happen is the discussion has to get broad enough that people start to recognize the internal nuances, and we get more specific language. But that's a process, and that's still happening for a lot of people, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
it's the same process, though, Rebecca, as kind of what you were talking about a little bit ago. I actually saw an article before we started this conversation in the Washington Post about Andrew being a long shot for now. It said, it was something like, he may be a long shot for now. And basically the article is from the Washington Post today. And he was saying essentially that a person is only a long shot and, until people start believing, the majority of people start believing that he's not a long shot, that he can actually win. And he feels like Andrew has reached that moment where people have gone from the not believing, the unbelieving phase, to the believing phase. And that once that shift happens where the majority of folks actually who are saying he couldn't do it, to start to say, you know what, he might actually be able to pull this off, is when, we will begin to see even more of a groundswell. And he feels like we're sort of at that moment now.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to, first of all, there's, generally speaking, 15 to 20% in any poll that's like still undecided. Like if you add the numbers up, they don't get to 100. And when we get whatever the Quinnipiac poll was, I think like 76% of voters are still undecided, and I don't know that we're going to. I think people see Andrew Yang and they just think, oh, steroids Bernie, and it's like, no, I don't think our target is like we have and we'll continue to get people from that group, but it's like I think what's really going to happen, it's really going to shock people, is we're going to start turning Biden voters. We're going to start getting those people that are like, I just want someone who can definitely beat Trump and beat him good.
Right.
Like we can't just like flip back just enough states to claw back a victory that's gonna like get tied up in some. I can't go to bed on election night and not have it. We gotta thrash them.
Yeah, it's gotta be like a solid, undeniable. Like we took states back from him that he that Obama didn't win even. Like we gotta like he won Tennessee and he flipped Texas.
Yeah. Whoa. We thought better was something. No, Andrew won Texas.
Well, listen, I saw on Twitter today a woman who's starting her gang group in Utah. Like, let's go, let's get it. I'm like, go Utah.
Wow.
It's a hard discussion because I think a lot of the times when you're talking, like when we're talking amongst ourselves kind of on the left, it's like a lot of the discussions of, well, why aren't we reaching out to more right-wing voters is like, well, a lot of the political issues that would require us, and we're not gonna throw people under the bus to do that. But Andrew's found a pathway that this is just such a huge coalition of people, that it's such a broad coalition that we just got to show people that Andrew can reach the whole country.
Yeah.
So.
Did you guys see that Trump or someone on his media team had Snapchatted about what Andrew said during the debate? Because I thought that was notable because, of course, everyone's going to say anti-Trump stuff. And Andrew also said he was pro-impeachment, in principle, just not about making a whole rigmarole and taking up all the press time for it. But it was interesting. He kind of seized on Andrew's statement about the media not getting the story right about the problems that got Trump elected.
Right.
And even though Andrew says Trump's solutions are garbage and the exact opposite of what we need to do, conveniently, of course, Trump didn't retweet that. But he was like, Andrew Yang recognizes that the media isn't concentrating on the right things. And or someone on his team Snapchatted that. I thought that was huge because it's like, on the one hand, of course, it's one of the few things we agree on. But on the other hand, it's like he's paying attention to the Dem debates, and he's also trying to call out something he actually agrees with. Because they probably just couldn't help themselves. They were like, wow, someone on the left is like calling out that the media is not 100% right on what's going on in America. So that was huge.
What it reminded me of is I don't think the Trump campaign takes us seriously yet. Maybe a little bit. I mean, they did make that comment about how, but I think they were trying to more, put down Pete than put up Yang when they're like, we're more afraid of Yang than Pete. But they're just kind of like, well, this person will never win, so we can safely engage, and it won't come back to bite us. And Trump should know better.
Well,
Trump should know.
He
Trump
came out of nowhere too, right?
You should know. And MSNBC certainly has figured it out.
I don't know. I tend to think that we're a little bit more on their radar, than we think. I do think that, they were trying to take a swipe at Pete, if you will. I saw that same comment about, we're more afraid of Yang than we are of Pete Buttigieg. But at the same time, they're paying attention. They would have to be. And I think that even part of that whole Snapchat, acknowledgement, if you will, whether it was Trump or somebody in his camp, could be interpreted as noticing that we're peeling off some of their voters, and a way to say, to them that, hey, you know, we're not that, I mean, we're different from Yang, but we're not that different from, you know what I'm saying? Just kind of give them a little notice that he too at least notices Andrew Yang.
I'm wondering, you know, this could just be paranoia here. But I kind of wonder if they just toss that out there because they're like, oh, if Trump says something nice about Yang, maybe that'll cause some ruckus within their ranks, you know? Maybe that'll get people fighting amongst themselves, and it's like,
They might have, but at the same time, so many of his folks are in our ranks. It really, right. You know what I'm saying? It really, if that was the intention, I think that they know that regardless of how, you know, we do or not do, if they don't have, and this is my opinion, you know, the interference and support from outside folks that they appear to have had in 2016, they're going to have a rough go of it. So they got a little bit more on their plate in my, you know, mind to really be worrying about right now, because you know, I'm hoping that we've got stuff in place and there's going to be better scrutiny. And then I think voters in general are just being much more informed now. We're watching for the misinformation campaigns and the propaganda things that are coming across, you know, Twitter and Facebook and things like that. So I think that, you know, prayerfully, we're going to have a much more informed electorate this time that are going to be on the lookout for any shenanigans, if you will. So, I don't necessarily think that bodes well for someone who may be intending to do some of the things that happened the last time.
I think one of the things that Yang can definitely go toe-to-toe with Trump on is this like whole likability thing. You know, like Trump has like all these fans and supporters, and he mostly got them from the internet, actually a lot of it from the internet as well. And Yang has us and the Yang gang, you know, of course, for real people, we vote in real life. But you can kind of tell from some of these exchanges, right? Like this idea that Trump is this, you know, well, he's been proven wrong, but he was like, I tell the truth. There's fake news, and then there's me. And Yang calls it out too. So there's this little bit of camaraderie, like, wow, Yang isn't just this puppet of the media. He's like, I call it out when you guys are like not telling the whole picture. And you guys are, you know, I'm a truth teller too, and probably better than Trump because it's like an Asian man who likes math, a little bit, you know, has got the problems right a little bit more and the solutions a lot more right, you know.
That's some of the Trump supporters that we pulled over have said that in a sense that, Andrew, you're the person we thought Trump was going to be. That, you know, that's what we support in you, is that you tell it like it is, you make it plain and simple, you're talking to the people, and you're actually genuine, and you know, we trust that you're going to actually do what it is, you know, that you're saying that you are coming to do, and that's what we thought Trump was going to do.
Yeah, I think it's really easy because I think it's one of those things where I think when Andrew has you know, he mentions that like when he talks about the problems, everyone is all the voters he talks to, especially out in Iowa, are kind of like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. And they're already kind of on a level aware of what's going on. Like there's a real problem where DC just, they don't know what's happening, like the Beltway political establishment. And the people do. And so when you know what's happening and one person also knows what the problem is, if the other person doesn't even know what's wrong, you're not going to make it down the line to comparing the candidates. Because a couple years ago, it was like, well, Donald Trump had a very clear vision of what he thought was wrong, and it really didn't matter that the solutions were bad because he was so locked in with the voter base. We were not quite anticipating losing quite so quickly.
I'd like to add to that it is important to see what's wrong. And yes, I do agree that you know, folks inside the Beltway here may not get that. But it also, the difference, I think, and particularly with Andrew, is that not only does he see what's wrong, he actually cares about what's wrong. And that for me is the difference and the genuineness that people are seeing, because, you know, in my opinion, you know, President Trump saw it and exploited it, if you will, you know, for his own advantage, and didn't necessarily really genuinely care about what was happening, which was demonstrated in the different types of policies that he enacted, you know, once he got into office. You know, not only did Andrew, you know, has he seen, but he actually cares about what's happening to people and feels like that's what's essential in getting things done. That many people around the country see what's happening. They, you know, on a daily basis, we all see malls closing, and we all see businesses going under, and we all see bills piling up on our own tables, and, you know, and not sure how to pay for them. And we're wondering, does anybody really care about what's happening with me? And that's essentially what led me to the campaign in the first place. Was an article I read in the New York Times back in February 2018. The robots are coming. It was introducing Andrew's campaign, and all throughout the article, it was talking about the threats of automation and how people were struggling, and no one seemed to care. And I was like, I don't know who this guy is, but he's not talking like anyone I've ever heard. And he seems authentic, and I want to be a part of this, because he started talking about humanity. He started talking about, you know, the least of these, the poor, those who are suffering, and that sold me on the first article I read about him.
Yeah. Back to the topic of race, I think that has a lot. You can see the difference in the solutions that Yang is proposing versus what Trump is proposing, because the race factor came in where we were talking about exploitation of the things that were going wrong. You know, it's the scarcity mindset, as Andrew calls it, where he's like, you know, if there's only so many slices of pie, yes, and if the immigrants take a slice and that's less for you, or like, you right, know, global trade, like, mm-hmm, yeah, there's only a certain number of jobs, and, you know, China takes some jobs, Mexico takes some jobs, we have fewer jobs, and that's the end of the story. It's very black and white picture, like, that's it, versus, and it's very like backward looking, because, you know, at a certain point, trade, you know, even in China, they're automating away jobs. So, you know, regardless of how many jobs China gets or doesn't get, or Mexico gets or doesn't get, they're going to be machines that are, you know, that are filling up all the factories in China, Europe, and the United States and whatnot. And so that moves you away from like being, you know, stoking racist fires of like, you know, I hate this or that race because they're, you know, doing these or bad things that are affecting me, and more like big picture, like we're all undergoing this transformational change together, and, you know, all races within the United States, and here's a way forward on how we can work together. So
yeah, automation doesn't discriminate.
So what did you think about Andrew's performance as far as bringing in women voters? Do you think that he did what he needed to do to increase involvement and interest from women in his campaign?
Oh yeah, when he got when he got a little roast in on Elizabeth Warren, when he was like, I thought this was where she was going with this answer, and then he you know, the economy is fundamentally misogynist, and insofar that it disadvantages women, it disadvantages their political participation, because that political participation is so driven by money. And actually, this was, I think Stacy on the last episode was kind of talking around this as well, that like when there's like these dynamics to these revolutions where if you're already out of power, it's just so circular. Yeah, I think that was and it was a good soundbite too. That's probably the other thing that, like, I hate to admit probably matters, but he did get a good soundbite in with, you know, you get men in a room together and alone too long, they turn into morons. Yeah, that's there's something to that.
You know, I really like that response he had, because it is hilarious and soundbite catchy, but it also kind of brings something to the forefront, which is like women and men working together is what we need to solve this country's problems. Like if you don't have representative government, it's all men trying to solve problems that are supposed to help men and women, you're not going to get the right answers. And to Andrew's point, you know, it's like an echo chamber that you're not, you know, they probably will come up with some bad decisions if you leave them alone, but it's not like we don't want men and we only want women.
Right.
Like the idea, he was like, we need strong men and female leaders together working on problems, you know. And I thought that was a great answer, because it doesn't take away at all from what men bring to the table, but it adds, you know, what women bring. And then, and it's not like 1 + 1 = 2. It's like multiplying the effects, because if men and women work together, then, you know, it's a lot better than if, you know, just women work on society's problems or just men. It's just a very, very unifying answer. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I thought so.
I think having a complementary, like talking about gender in a complementary way is really going to do strong things for him with like evangelical voters, especially, and like other, I think like a lot of Christian voters that are pretty fed up with Trump. I think there's a lot to be done there as far as outreach for the Yang Gang.
Wendy, you might have thoughts on religious outreach.
Yes, I you know, especially, you know, Rebecca, you talk about the evangelical voters, and I know that you all heard about the Christianity Today, perhaps an editorial that came out in the last couple of days, where they are asking for Trump's removal, which is huge, in a sense that they are essentially rejecting what they consider gross immoral, you know, behavior on the president's part. I looked at that really as a shift, as a potential shift in what evangelical voters in particular are beginning to value more. And so in that vein, they may start opening up and broadening more to the message, the sort of universal message of dignity and humanity that Andrew offers. I'm not quite ready to say that they're going to, you know, let go of a lot of the more traditional sorts of topics that evangelicals are connected with, but I do think that there is room to make inroads into that particular voting bloc. That being said, I too liked what Andrew said about, you know, misogyny and the anti-woman workplace. And, you know, anytime you get some sort of those buzzwords out there, if you will, it makes people's, you know, eyebrows raise, like, And I really liked it because so much of the media, if you will, tries to paint this campaign as white millennial men only. You know, they tend to diminish the participation, the role, and the number of women who are in support of this campaign. And you know, quite personally, it makes me upset, you know, because I'm like, well, what are we, chopped liver? You know, when I see these takes that somehow, and while I do know majority, you know, there are a majority men that support us, but our coalition is so much broader than that. And so anytime Andrew has an opportunity to highlight that or emphasize that in what he says or what he demonstrates, I think that it's helpful across a broad cross-section of folks.
So on the women thing, I think he's been super perceptive on, you know, expressing some of the things that women face. And you would think that Klobuchar and Warren would express them better, but Yang, I think, has done a better job than they have, because I think at least half of what Klobuchar and Warren have been saying is just like symbolic. Like, I'm a woman, and so I would be like the youngest ever inaugurated woman, like, which Warren joked about, which was a hilarious line. I liked it. It was very punchy, but it doesn't necessarily address, you know, the on the ground perspective. And she did mention the 100,000 selfies. which have a lot of were taken with women, but she didn't tie that, you know, exactly to like specific things that women face that men don't. Yeah. And same thing with Klobuchar. She's like, you know, 5'4" was the height of a previous president. Hint, hint, you know, I'm a woman. It's about my height. I'd be fine as a president too. But, you know, Yang was like, I know it was a little bit of snide, you know, coming at Buttigieg, shaking the money tree in the wine cave, but it's the reality that women face. Yes. Right? Like if you're a woman trying to get funding for your company and you're going to like a VC firm or something, like what are the chances that everyone you're going to meet is a woman or is like a perfectly well-behaved male and you don't have to worry at all about like, you know, them like winking at you and like come to my hotel room and like all this weird stuff. And then in the political arena too, especially, right? Mm-hmm. So being able to have democracy dollars and being able to, you know, put money in the hands of everyone will make those like backroom deals, you know, a lot fewer in number and empower women to succeed in politics and business and such. So I thought that was great.
I agree.
Yeah. So we talked about his what he said about race, what he said about women and what they could do with the freedom dividend and democracy dollars. And is there anything else you wanted to touch on regarding his debate performance, or did you want to talk a little bit more about the other candidates and how you think they did?
I'm running through it in my mind. I mean, it's really valuable how funny he's gotten. I mean, I think he was always funny. I think that was always there, but like, maybe I just got like convinced because like when I first started telling people about him, people were like, "Oh, he's so uncharismatic." That's like, I don't know. People seem to really like him, so we got to keep hitting these debates, and we got to keep hitting, you know, as many impressions as we can with people because it's working.
Well, you know, I think, you know, that line that he opened up his closing statement with, you know, people are wondering, what am I doing up here with them? You know? That was fantastic. You know, the audience had to say, yeah, you're right.
But he wants them to think about it. He wants it for those of us that have been around forever, it seems like, you know, 10 years in the Yang Gang. That's what it feels like. We already, I think we have this idea that like we started supporting him when he was like, he had like, you know, no donors basically, you know, his email list was his donor list. Like he was personally interacting with people on base camp and like, you know, it was just super grassroots, and to see it go from there to here, it's like, I think we all realize, oh, we can do anything. Mm-hmm. But I think Andrew's got to like do a little bit of like kind of making the audience be like, yeah, I shouldn't be up here, and maybe you should like ask why that is, because there's a pretty cool answer.
Well, you know what it does is, again, it's a professional sort of speaking tool, you know, but it validates the insecurities or you know, of your audience. So it was a way, it's sort of that self-deprecating thing that he does too. You know what I'm saying? You know, it was him almost saying, I know sometimes I wonder how I'm up here too, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm right there with you. You know what I'm saying? Because I know that there are people out here who are wondering how the heck I got up here. But the bottom line is, I'm here. And not only am I here, but I'm here because people put me here, because I have ideas that people, you know, clearly want to hear. And so he was able to, you know, sort of spin off of that. And, you know, Christine, when I think about the other candidates, I try to think about them, you know, objectively, because, you know, like I said, I was, you know, gang before any of these other candidates announced. I think the only other candidate announced before Andrew was John Delaney. You know?
Wow, yeah.
John Delaney, he's been running since 2014. But other than him,
John Delaney is going to be running for the 2020 nomination.
Gosh, you guys are hilarious.
Well, Andrew was second after John Delaney. And so, you know, as these other sort of candidates, you know, entered the race and joined the race, you know, and I paid attention and I watched them. Of course, I got pressured from friends, like when Kamala Harris joined, like, aren't you going to support the Black woman? And, and then, those kinds of things. And it's never been about that for me. It's always been about the message. And even with Andrew, I love Andrew. He's a wonderful person, cool guy, corny and quirky. But even for me, the support is more about the message and what he's trying to do than it is about the man. I mean, the man is cool, but the message is why I'm here. And that's what brought me along. That's what I'm here to promote. Because I think, and even Andrew would probably attest to the fact that this message and this mission, if you will, is bigger than him. He just happened to be the one who was willing to rise to the challenge. And as he said before, when he went to Evelyn to say, pretty much, I think I want to run for president.
How are you going to get health insurance?
Evelyn was like, okay, what about health care? But then even she too said, you know what, Andrew? She said after she looked and she, listened to the message and understood it, she almost said to him, you have to do this. Like it was a call for him. Like I had no choice but to say, you got to do this. And when you have a call, I'm talking from a spiritual perspective, when you have a call to do something, you don't really have the option of whether, you can run from it, but it's still, but eventually you yield to it and you surrender and you do, because you understand that call is so much larger than who you are. It's not about you. It's about the people you're being called to and called to serve. So for me, not necessarily sensing that in any of the other candidates, kind of shifted my support, but I appreciate things about them. But I honestly, they're all lovely people. I pray for all of them, because running for president is no joke. I mean, what you have to do, what you have to sacrifice, and all of those things. But at the end of the day, for me, Andrew is trying to pull this country kicking and screaming into the 21st century. We cannot keep doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. And for me, everybody that was running and is running is talking from a standpoint and a vantage point of 20th century, the way we've always done things. They got the same rhetoric, the same ideas, and that is not going to get us moving ahead to the future. The future is leaving us behind. It's already too late, in some regard. We're way behind the curve. And I need somebody who recognizes that and is putting forward things that are going to bring us into that century, because we can't keep falling behind.
Yeah, I think there's people up there that would make really, really good federal executives. Like that would make phenomenal, that would do the job for 4 to 8 years, and all of the duties of the presidency would be, and I think Andrew would too. This isn't like leading up to a but. I mean, it kind of is. The thing that separates Andrew, though, is I want the president to be competent. If the president's not competent, they can't be president. That's the baseline, and he is. But I also don't want all of that to just go away the second our democracy swings back the other direction. I want. And when I see Andrew being like, well, I'm going to start to move things in a direction where you individually have this thing that nobody can take from you and is long-term and gives you actual agency to do things like say no to situations. It's like, that's it right there. That's not, no one else is playing the same game.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that way when I was listening to different people, like not only just this debate, but a lot of the debates. Like Booker's no longer there. Last time he talked about building wealth among Black communities. I was like, ding, 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 freedom dividend, right? This time, Bernie was talking about homelessness. And I was like, oh, that's one thing that, Scott Santos and some people have been posting about, where, the minimum wage and federal jobs guarantee is great for working families, right? But what about everyone, like homeless people included, right? And so he talked about homeless people on the debate stage. I think Bernie did. And the whole time I was just thinking, yeah, Yang's policies address homelessness and will help solve that problem, or at least, get rid of a lot of it. And then same thing with Warren. She was talking about like women working longer hours and her providing great childcare. And I was like, that's great for a subsection of women that work, but what about, you know, all women, and a lot of women who choose, you know, not to work in a corporate environment and instead stay home? Or if men want to choose that as well, like, why don't you help all people and give them options and agency? Yeah. And so it was really funny when Yang was given that random question at the end, and he like brought so much energy into the room about the gift versus the apology. And he talked about his book, because you could tell like he really believes in his message and how it really is kind of an elegant solution and a way of moving forward for everyone. And Buttigieg was right after him, and he just like he couldn't really, I mean, I know he practices a lot and like puts the right emphasis on the right syllables for the right words, and, you know, and all that. And like, he's a great speaker, but like just spontaneously being asked a question like that in the moment, he couldn't plug his own book as hard or his own message because he doesn't have the vision. He was just like, yeah, maybe I should kind of send my book around too. He wasn't like, my book is better because it actually addresses the problem. He was just like, ha ha ha. Like,
I like books. I got a book and data too.
That was another one of those moments where it was like, there's the time that they give you. And there was a previous debate where I think Andrew, you know, even though he didn't get a lot of speaking time, he got a lot of the conversation time because he forced other candidates to engage on his issue. And that question, I'm sure they thought that this was going to like really throw him off. And so they're like, we'll give it to Yang first. We'll see how he does. And he got, I mean, he had a great answer himself. He engaged Warren on it, and he like pulled her into a positive interaction because she was trying to like, we could do a labor action on this, which was okay, credit Warren, that was pretty funny. And so we got Warren in on it, and then Pete's entire face plant just was an extension of Andrew's answer, basically. Like the whole time people are watching Pete face plant, they're like, oh, I'm going to get this War on Normal People book.
Right, which is now sold out on Amazon, and you cannot get until January 2020 now. So, it's totally where I loved it. You know, Andrew's face when they asked him that question was like, "What the? Okay, you know, I know he wanted to say like, is this like a real question right now?" But he knew like the camera's on you, and so he thoughtfully went through in his mind like, what am I going to do with this question? And I thought it was brilliant. Like, you know what? Well, Elizabeth, you've been reading my book. How about I give everybody books? I was like, yeah.
Well, he even did a nice rhetorical flourish where he's like, Elizabeth has done me the honor.
Yeah.
He didn't even like, he was self-aggrandizing while doing it. You can't defend that he wasn't. But he did it so well, and there was definitely a moment you could see it. I wish we had gotten Amy's face cam there, because I'm sure there were candidates who thought when that question came across, like, oh, he's done. He's gonna look so stupid.
Right. Right. He's gonna try to turn it in. How's he gonna turn that one into the freedom dividend? You know, right now.
Oh, I'm gonna turn it into the freedom dividend. That would be, see, that's the game show that I want to see a host do with Andrew. Is like, I think Trevor Noah might try something like this. Someone that kind of likes him is just to throw out the wildest situations and see if Andrew could reel it back to the freedom dividend. And I think he pretty reliably could, and it would be pretty funny to see him, you know, make some like stretches and
yeah.
He's quick. He's quick on his feet.
Yeah, very much so.
Any other thoughts on how any of the other candidates did?
We'll be interested. So, yeah, I do wish they could get Bloomberg up there on the stage.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I don't want anyone in Andrew's lane on the stage because Steyer is already taking up his entrepreneurship.
I don't think he is. I thought that at first when Tulsi and Steyer first made the debate. I thought, oh, dang it. But I think if they see Andrew and then Pete, Warren, Biden, Bernie, Amy over there, and Tom and Michael Bloomberg over there, they're going to be like, he is cutting a path through because there's billionaires, but they're self-funding. And Andrew has like real grassroots support. So if he can contrast himself, it brings him back to that message of like, no, I'm the uniter candidate. I'm the one that's the real like way to cut forward. So.
Yeah, Bloomberg has no black support. So let me just start right there. He has no, you understand what I'm saying? He is Mr. Stop and Frisk, Bloomberg.
You mean the guy that said, oh, it's okay that my soda tax punishes poor people. We want that.
Yeah. He's a non-starter for me. I mean, that's just personal. I think, Christy, I will give Amy Klobuchar some credit. I think that she held her own in this particular debate. I think that she, came across as knowledgeable and competent. And so I think that, for what it's worth and for where she stands in the polls, I don't think she hurt herself in any way. I think people now are, whereas Elizabeth Warren seemed to be carrying the lead female mantle in the race. I think that she, got into that a little bit, that people now see her as a competent, potential consideration. I just don't know how much her reach goes beyond the Midwest. She sort of painted herself as this folksy sort of Midwestern value centrist person, which is all well and fine. And even in that Iowa video, a couple of the folks were saying, well, I think she represents the upper Midwest very well. Now, I'm a Midwesterner. I'm from Ohio originally. Go Buckeyes. And so I know Amy, and I know Amy's. I know, women and, like her and, grew up around women like her. Mom worked with folks, that are, very much like her personality and things like that. But again, I don't know how much it resonates beyond the Midwest. I don't know how much, how open people will be to her in the South or out West or things, because that Midwest folksiness. The one thing I'll say too about Andrew, and this kind of goes back to something we were talking about earlier, what I appreciate about Andrew's message is that he is not going to have to, when he becomes the general, becomes the nominee, that's just me talking, he's not going to have to change his message. Most of these folks, when you're in a primary, particularly in Democratic primary, you say what you need to say to win, because you gotta win the primary. So you say a lot of things to get the base excited and all of that. And then what happens? You become the nominee, and then you got to pivot. You got to move back closer to the center, and then the base accuses you of abandoning them and lying to them just to get the nomination, and now you have to change your message. Andrew is not going to have to change his message. He's going to be able to stay on the same points that he's making throughout, and I think that is what is resonating with folks in all parts of the country, that everyone right now can tie into his message, and it's not going to have to change once he becomes the nominee. So I thought Amy had a strong performance. Pete and the other folks, they are who they are. I think they're going to remain where they are. I think that we and like I said, perhaps Klobuchar had the biggest room to move.
Yeah, I want to chime in on Klobuchar real quick, just because I think there's things about her that are probably valuable for the Yang Gang to be thinking about, which is that I actually kind of appreciate that she's certainly using certain rhetoric around, like, she's a woman candidate for office. But fundamentally, I think her campaign is a little different from, say, Hillary's that maybe did lean like really far into, I'm with her. And, at a certain point, it almost did just kind of feel like she threw her hands up and she's just like, first female president, come on. I think Amy Klobuchar's core message is her core strategy is probably very similar to Andrew's, in that they're both running as the most electable candidate. Mm-hmm. And that's maybe something that like people aren't talking about for either of them. But that's why Amy talks about the Midwest so much, is she's just saying like, I'm going to be able to win back those states that Trump won that broke our electoral college map. I think it's a good strategy. I don't think it's going to pay off, though, because I think Andrew has a version of it that is affirmative and positive. Like, I think Amy Klobuchar is almost like baby boomer parents getting a kick out of telling their kids the things they can't do. Like, she's just so very, well, we can't do this and we can't do this. And Andrew coming in with a message of like, no, we're gonna do these huge changes while still kind of staying in that same lane of like, but also I'm the candidate that's gonna flip all these Trump voters and independents and moderates and all these people that want Trump out of office. And that's I think why, that's why I think she was so frustrated with Andrew when he made that really good joke. She's just like, oh, if he comes in here with a more affirmative version of my lane, it's over. It's over.
Andrew, on a TMZ interview after the debate, was asked what he'd be looking for in a potential VP candidate to be on the same ticket as him. And the person asking him asked if he would consider anyone that was on the stage. And he kind of had a political non-answer, but he did give an additional nugget of information, which was that he wanted a running mate with connections in DC, because he was saying how he has the vision, but he wants someone to enact it, and he needs someone who like knows everyone on Capitol Hill. And that kind of narrows it down a little bit, actually, because, Tulsi Gabbard, congresswoman in Hawaii, right? Not like in the know, and then like
Tulsi's not greasing the like.
Yeah, and Mayor Pete is a mayor. Like he doesn't have extensive Capitol Hill experience, so it does narrow it down a bit to people like Klobuchar, whoever who have passed things legislatively, even if they're more small-minded in their vision or whatever. Like what he wants in a VP is someone with that network.
Or more years of Joe Biden VP.
Biden would definitely fulfill that, but I don't know if he would want to be VP again, so.
That would...
Yeah. I don't have any personal knowledge, but I would like to think that Andrew is looking for a woman. Just, I think that, will someone like a Kamala, they had a very good relationship and developed a very good rapport on the campaign trail, and he genuinely misses her, and has talked about that. And of course other people are saying, no, she'd be a great AG and things like that. And there's other names floating out there too, but I agree with Andrew, and that's what a good leader does. A leader is someone who recognizes where their strengths are and where their areas of improvement are, and is not insecure about bringing along people or joining people with them who might be stronger than them in particular areas. If you're a weaker type of leader, and if you're fairly insecure about your leadership abilities, the people you surround yourself with who are people who you don't think lead as well as you, so that you can make yourself look better. You know what I'm saying? But when you are a competent leader in an area, what you do is you look for other leaders who are stronger in areas that you're not, and you all come together because you understand that makes you stronger. So that would make total sense that, and that would also, I think for Andrew, assuage some of the folks who are on the fence about the fact, well, he doesn't have any Washington experience really, and he doesn't know the ins and the outs, if you will. So I think that if he, did choose to go that direction, it would also bring some additional folks on that were saying, okay, well, now I know that at least, because that's what happened with Obama. Some people said, well, Obama's just this, state senator, and he hasn't had a lot of experience in Washington. When he brought Joe Biden on, they're like, oh, he'll be fine. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish there's a weird constitutional thing where you can't have a vice president from the same state as the president. But I had thought before I thought of that Kirsten Gillibrand would be a really solid person to like balance out Yang's ticket and go to DC and enact his agenda, because they shared a lot of policies. Postal banking was something that she pushed into the spotlight, and that's such a huge. It amazes me how much of a racket check she is. Oh my gosh.
Well, this is my own personal choice. Even though she doesn't have any Washington experience, I would absolutely love to see him tap Stacey Abrams.
Oh my God. That would be huge for votes.
Listen, it's a wrap.
Yeah.
Are we waiting Stacey Abrams financial or VP though? Should we just sit on her, let her fix Georgia for a bit, and then she can come in after Yang?
Well, I'm only saying that because she has recently expressed that she would be open to a vice presidential nomination. At first, she was saying no. People were actually already encouraging her to run, and she was saying that. Right now she was more focused on Georgia, but here in the recent months and within the last couple of weeks, she's done at least 2 interviews where she says, she would be open to being someone's vice president because she doesn't feel like it's important, that she shouldn't diminish her ambition. She acknowledged that some of her saying, no, I don't want to talk about it, was trying to give the impression that she didn't have the ambition to be in higher office. But now she says, I don't have to do that. So yes, I would absolutely be open to being on a vice presidential ticket, because that is a part of the ambition that I have. So that's my personal, that would be my personal choice. But 2, like I said, I also get that having a Washington hand nearby would be helpful as well. So.
Yeah, well, we can't put the cart before the horse, though, right? We have to win.
True. I'm just dreaming, I'm just being a futurist like Andrew, right? He's been looking.
Oh, go ahead, Rebecca. You were saying something.
He's either going to have to go with some DC vet, or I always thought a really interesting play for Andrew if he really wanted to. I think I was talking about this before we recorded. If he just wanted to smash Trump out of the general, like 35, 40, 45 states, something nutso, get a general for a VP. I mean, he can. The VP really is just a campaign position. Like, you are campaign mascot. So it's not like there's really any power in it. Mm-hmm. And if he got like one of like the people that was like really horrified by Trump in that position to like, because that's the other thing people will say is, well, what's his foreign policy hand going to be like? But that's kind of been my thing for a while. Is like, if he went that direction, he could, he could win so many states. Maybe.
Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts, everyone. I think the next step is to work on all the various things we need to do to get Andrew elected, right? Like, there are various ballot initiatives in all the different states.
Well, we also need to get him on the January debate stage. I mean, I think that's...
Oh, yeah. Definitely. We need to get him on the January debate stage.
They just released the qualifications, the criteria, yesterday, and we have the donors, but we only have one of the 3 qualifying polls, and the deadline is January 10th. So we have a very short window with 2 holidays coming up for him to get the 3 additional polls that he would need to get on the January debate stage.
Yeah, I was actually worried about that because it says that he needs 4 polls, right? We only have 1, and he needs 3 more, but there are only probably about 4 polls being released. So he needs to get 3 out of those 4 polls.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
No, I think there's going to be, they're comparing that to how many have been released since like the holiday, since like Thanksgiving. There were only 3 or 4 qualified. There were many polls, but in terms of the qualifying ones, there were maybe only 3 or 4 that were released from the last debate through Thanksgiving and that. So if they decreased that much, the qualifying polls during Thanksgiving, how much more are they going to decrease between Christmas and New Year's? And that's such a short window to get 3 additional polls. Now, or we could get, it's the three polls at 5%, or we could get 2 early state polls at 7%. So come on, New Hampshire, come on.
Oh yeah, Yang Week in Iowa, right?
Yeah.
Full week people are going there.
If we could pull off a 7% in two of the qualifying states before January 10th, those are also ways to get him in. So I think that's the big focus, is getting him on that January debate stage. And quite honestly, it's very important for the DNC because, there's this potential, if you will, and I'm back to the race thing again, of having the party reflected by simply having white candidates on the stage, which was something they almost risked this last time. Of course, Andrew made it at the last minute. But I was wondering, what would it say and what would it look like, if the DNC didn't have adequate representation on the stage? So they actually need us. They need a person of color on the stage, because I would imagine that would really backfire on the DNC in our favor. Someone I saw online said, if he doesn't make this January debate stage, then, they need to host him, Corey, and Julian Castro need to host like a fundraiser of some sort, or something to their advantage to take, to highlight, what's happening. So we'll see what happens, but, it's certainly more beneficial to keep Andrew's face before the public, and, some folks that only watch debates and things like that. So definitely want him on the stage. But at this particular juncture, being so close to voting, it's also important we get him on ballots and things like that, because the folks who are with us are with us,
Yeah, I think the one good thing though is I think it's good that the poll drought is at the beginning of the window and not the end of it, because essentially what we have in front of us is January 10th is the cutoff. There's not going to be any polls. There might be some leading up to Christmas Eve, maybe a couple, but then Christmas is going to happen, and we're going to know that we have Christmas through to New Year's, and maybe a little bit after New Year's, where there's not going to be polls, and we just got to be like, okay, there's no polls. Let's turn our attention elsewhere, and we got to hit really consistently on canvassing, text banking, these ballot initiatives. And if we get out, we have such a tremendous opportunity from this debate performance. Did anybody watch the Van Jones interview that they did after? And Van kind of let it slip that there were maybe more Gambino level endorsements coming.
I didn't catch that. I mean, I saw some of the highlights from the spin.
I can't say I don't know for sure what it was, but Van definitely seemed to indicate that we have there's a lot more coming. That this is when the campaign is arranged everything for liftoff, and they're really going to start this is when we're going to let off the broadside, and I think they got a lot. I think they got a lot stored up. I think it's going to be really exciting.
Well, I think it's really emphasizes too just how timely the Yang Week campaign is going to be. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if we were factoring all that in when we came, when the dates were released about Yang Week, because I think folks were just kind of, what's a good week to go that's, still kind of out from the primary or the caucuses, not knowing that that's going to be the actual week leading up to the next debate and all of that. You know what I'm saying? So it actually is going to be great timing. And so, yes, if for whatever reason Andrew does not make it on the stage, I think you'll see even more increased participation in Yang Week, and folks getting out there and knocking on doors and keeping his face and keeping his name, in front of potential voters.
Oh yeah, and these debates are they're getting close together now. So if we miss 7, but we get 8, who knows when they're going to announce the qualifiers for 8? But it's missing 1 now has it seems like it would be a much higher impact. But as long as we're still growing, if we have a weird window where it's just, and we know that's what it was, we had half the window and half of it was taken up by Christmas, and we're still growing and we can all see it. I think, if we had missed the December one, that could have gotten a little dicey. But at this point, I feel like we're starting to have our own gravity and momentum that week that, you know.
Right, that the debate really just kind of supplements what else we have, as opposed to us really needing. I mean, it's like I said, it's good to be on there, but if we had missed this one, we would have been sort of a forgotten, like, you know, he couldn't even make it. But the fact that we made it through the entire year, that we keep qualifying, that we keep showing up, that people after this debate determine, okay, this guy is here. He's a contender. He's not, you know, just a flash in the pan, if you will. He's still here. He's gaining momentum. He's gaining endorsements, you know, and things like that. So now I want to hear more from him. Now I want to take him seriously. And so the others, unfortunately, you know, are beginning to sort of fade in. It's about top of mind awareness and things like that. And folks have been clamoring for that, you know, in terms of the Democratic primary, like, get all these 17 people off the stage. Just give me a good core group of folks, you know, and let me keep those folks in my mind, and everybody else I can just, you know, can kind of just let them go, because at this point it's too close to caucus for me to still be trying to decide between 10 and 15 people. So it was good for us to be in that sort of final group. Andrew said this, he said, you know, holidays are also going to be a good time. Families are around, they start having conversations.
Oh, I think that probably, you know, that we did see a poll pickup after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
There's no way, you know, sometimes I think you can think, you know, maybe you're overreading the tea leaves or whatever, but like this is it right here. This is definitely what happened, is people talked at Thanksgiving. It raised the poll numbers. It worked.
Right. So if we get that sort of kind of, you know, family holiday bump, if you will, I honestly think that we can pull a couple of sevens in the early states and just and go from there. But February, guys, the caucus is going to be here before you know it, and that's where the rubber really meets the road, and that is where our focus. I agree with you, Christina. That's where our focus should be now. The ballots, making sure he's on the ballots, you know, in the different states, and making sure that, you know, we are talking to people and just touching them and reaching them, you know, personally. And asking them. People appreciate it when you ask them for their vote, you know, not just make assumptions that they're going to vote for you, but actually, you know, maybe Andrew needs to go to Iowa and just have like a group beer summit with all those people that said they wanted.
We just had a giant bus tour, right? So that was smart.
Yeah, right. Right. May need to do that again and go to some other parts, you know, some additional parts of the state or whatever.
I think, of course, if you're in Iowa or near Iowa or in the Midwest or near New Hampshire, I think Andrew said it was a 4.5 hour drive from New York. So he was like telling all the New York people to go to New Hampshire. But if you're, you know, within a 4-hour drive of any of the early states, obviously your time could best be spent like going to the state to canvass and whatnot. But if not, you know, in your individual states, you can help the nearest state that needs ballot, you know, people to sign to make sure he gets on the ballots. And then, you know, behind that, donating is huge because we have to show good fundraising numbers by the end of the year. And that empowers everyone who can actually go canvass and actually do things, right? So,
yes.
And the ads that go up in the early states as well.
And text banking. There's also text and phone banking. So, you know, that's something that people can do, you know, from the comfort of their own homes and things like that. If you can't get to a state, you can certainly make some phone calls and, you know, reach out to some folks from where you are. So there's a number of things. And that's the good thing about the Yang Gang, is that, you know, we're willing to get out there and to do, you know, whatever it takes. So it certainly won't be from a lack of effort that Andrew would, you know, potentially not make the debate stage or something. It wouldn't be because folks aren't trying desperately to make it happen.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited that I'm going to New Hampshire actually for New Year's Eve.
Oh.
So that's my little plug, like,
okay.
You know.
there's no way that something big's going to happen there, I think, just because that's the most advance notice we've ever had for any event in this entire campaign.
I'm going to try live streaming from there, so we'll find out.
I'm super curious because it's like, Childish Gambino endorsing was cool, but the timing of it also suggests to me that that's not our coolest endorsement.
And he's on staff. I don't know if you know, well,
he's on staff.
He has come on as a creative consultant, which is insane. insane.
I wonder what he has planned for the campaign. That's amazing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You know, I would not hesitate to say that he is probably the best match of a job and talent. Like what we need is we need to grab the attention, kind of zeitgeisty attention, and he knows how. He's gonna pull Andrew aside. And he's gonna give Andrew like really what he needs as far as dominating the media cycles going forward. Because eventually they're gonna you know, we just saw MSNBC do it. They gave up on their boycott of Yang. They finally mentioned him on air.
Mm-hmm.
After
you can't not mention one of the top 5 people in the race.
Oh, they tried.
They tried to for almost a month. They tried to.
Well, yeah, I agree with you, Rebecca. I do think that there are other things coming, you know, down the, you know, all good things. I mean, there's even some folks who have sort of, you know, announced their support online, you know, Hannibal Buress, you know, who's a comedian, and, you know, Eddie Griffin said some positive things. You know, of course, Dave Chappelle has said some things at some of his most recent, you know, concerts and things like that. And so any of those things help. You know, we certainly, you know, can count those things as being help. But, you know, at the end of the day, it really is about the people. It's about the folks who are like we said earlier, donating, you know, all of their earthly goods to do what they can to support the campaign. It's the $2 donations, and it's the $1 donations, and it's the folks who are maxing out, you know what I'm saying, that you know, can't necessarily afford to, but are saying this is worth it. You know, they're making this investment. And so this, you know, this campaign in and of itself is going to be so historic, you know, to be written about in days and in months to come, because it's still being written right now.
Yeah.
Well, any last thoughts?
No, I think we might have to split this one in half.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining the podcast, Wendy. It was great having you, and thanks, Rebecca, for also participating in this panel. I thought it was a great conversation, and look forward to, you know, I think since we're having this on Zoom in the cloud, I think there's ways we can edit it, and then we'll release it to the masses.
Okay, well, just let me know when you release it. That'd be great.
Okay, thanks so much for being on, Wendy.
No
we'll
problem.
be in touch.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Bye, Rebecca.
Thanks. Bye.